Hello, everybody. Bigfoot, Michigan Rob here. It's Friday the 13th. Time for another encounter story from a subscriber. This, I don't think, is a subscriber. I got an email on this. This is an intriguing story. This is going to be the longest story I've ever done on here. So do not turn off the video. Watch it to the end. I've put a lot of time in this. In fact, this is my sixth take. And in fact, I did a little behind the scenes research on this. There's a couple things I did want to qualify because this is 40 minutes from my house. This is a great story. Great story. Dogman Island. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did going through this. Here we go. Rob, I bought a home in Grosse Ile, Michigan back in 1979. It was a beautiful old New England style home sitting on East River Road. Woods surrounded both sides of my home, and I had a beautiful 90-foot riverfront that led to a nice sandy beach. Vacation home, or not on vacation, I am proud to say. The home was built during the days of Prohibition, when bootlegging of booze was transported to and from Canada utilizing the Detroit River. East River Road, that I lived on, was nothing more than my address of the home. In fact, my home was off the Detroit River, so I need to qualify that. My home sat upon a hill, so you need to walk down to the beachfront. At the base of the hill, it was covered with wild vegetation, flowers, and an assortment of all sorts of shrubbery and the like. After 2 years of living at the residence, my wife Sally and I started hearing the muffled sounds of howling, like perhaps a dog. The thought of a wolf did not even cross our minds. And number one, there are not any wolves on Grosse Ile, let alone lower southern Michigan. These howls would be heard frequently, almost every other day. Yet we could not place the location. Sometimes the howls seemed like they came from the basement, and to be more precise, from inside our wine cellar. One night, as the howls started up, I went to the basement. I walked over to the wine cellar, and as soon as I opened the door, the howls stopped. I'm thinking to myself, what is going on? Obviously, there was not an animal inside my house, and I started to get a chill running through my body. I had brushed it off. Perhaps my wife and I were hearing things. That, however, does not make a lot of sense. How can my wife and I both be hearing these sounds? Several weeks went by without a sound, and to be honest, Sally and I were relieved. Then, late one evening, around 6 p.m., my wife and I went down to the base of the hill leading to the beach to relax and look at the freighters crossing past our home. Sally and I both love watching these huge vessels and other boats pass by. It was very serene and relaxing, an experience that my wife and I spent hours admiring. On this particular night, the howls once again started up. Sally and I were sitting at the water's edge, and these howls were in back of us. Startled, we both got up from our chairs, our chaise chairs, and started to walk back towards the howls. The closer we got to the base of the hill, the louder the howls became. The howls grew more ferocious and threatening the closer we got to the hill, yet not an animal or dog in sight. Upon reaching the base of the hill, these howls appeared to come from inside the hill. So now these howls are like inside the earth, inside the hill of the house, you guys. Perplexed and somewhat scared, Sally and I walked along the hill. The howls still rang out in the night, and we both are stunned and have no explanation. Was this hill haunted? This started to ring through Sally and my thoughts. Impossible. We both agreed, as we never really believed in ghosts or the paranormal. The howls finally stopped, and Sally and I went in, made dinner, and spent the entire night awake pondering as to what we were experiencing. That night, the wife and I did not get much sleep. We wanted to get to the bottom of this mystery. We came to the agreement that we would play investigators and decided to start off with the original source of these sounds, that being in our wine cellar. We got up around 9 in the morning the next day and went to the basement and entered our wine cellar. I stood in the middle of the cellar on both side walls. We had racks of wine as well as the very back wall. For whatever the reason, I picked up a broomstick and flipped it around and started to use the end of the handle and started to hit against the side walls. Both of the side walls appeared solid until I reached the very back wall. Again, I flipped the handle around and struck the back wall. To my surprise, the wall rang hollow. It echoed, and I realized the back wall was not solid. Sally and I began to remove all the bottles of wine and started to take down the wine rack. I started to hit the wall more and more and more, and I realized that I needed to take down this wall. I can't believe what I am about to do. I went into my toolbox, and started to smack a hammer into the wall. My wife is staring at me like I'm crazy, until the hammer went straight through the wall, creating a sizable hole. I went to look into the hole, and to my amazement, there appeared to be a tunnel or corridor on the other side. So now, you guys, this guy's got something in his wine cellar on the other side of this wall. It appears to be hollow. It appears to be a tunnel. And there laid a tunnel, indeed. Sally and I are both excited and somewhat in shock, all at the same time. The tunnel was no more than 4 feet wide by 5 feet tall. We were both over 5 feet tall and had to duck down as we entered this strange finding. So now you guys are going into this tunnel. It was dark, and after about 10 feet, I circled back to get a flashlight. We both now continue on. Both Sally and I are armed with our flashlights. Sally behind me lighting the pathway ahead, and I scanned the ground in front of me. We walked perhaps 90 feet or so when I started to notice a set of oversized dog-like or wolf-like prints or tracks. When I say oversized, they were at least double the size of any dog prints that I had ever seen. These prints were sporadic. They started up, then stopped. Started up again, then stopped. Then the top of the tunnel got taller, whereas Sally and myself could finally walk fully upright, and to be honest, we were both ready to turn back as our necks were getting tight and very sore. The tracks picked up again, and I had to take a double look at the prints of these oversized dog-like tracks that traveled on a set of 4. Now, all of a sudden, they become bipedal, or how shall I say, walking like a human. The tunnel started to smell. It was dank and musty. The walls of the tunnel, as well as the ground beneath us, began to get wet and muddy. Our ears began to pop or ring. Our breathing began to strain or become labored. The oxygen was diminishing. We both stopped and realized that this tunnel has now got to be under the river. So they're walking out inside their home. They're underneath this tunnel. They're foraging out. Now they're getting toward the river. So now apparently they're now underneath the river. Sally and I turned around and started to head back to our home. Upon reaching our home, Sally and I are ecstatic about our finding. It was early afternoon at this time, and I ran to the top of my deck off the back of my home and peered out onto the river. Then I put 2 and 2 together. In the distance, maybe a quarter mile or more away, there is a chain of uninhabited islands that line up directly from the base of my home and in the approximate location of my tunnel. My very first thought was that our home and the tunnel had been used for bootlegging of liquor to and from Detroit in Canada. What an ingenious idea, I thought. My home now is a part of history. Sally and I, without a doubt, need to investigate this further. Upon going online, we found that Grosse Ile was indeed used for bootlegging during Prohibition. Sometimes wooden boats were used, and yes, in some cases, elaborate tunnel systems were used. Now, in our minds, we believe this property was indeed a part of history, but what about those dog-like tracks? And even more intriguing, the bipedal prints. We now know we need to take a trip to those uncharted or uninhabited chains of islands across the way. The next day, we set off on our journey. We loaded up our 28-foot Sea Ray boat, and off we went. We stopped at the first island directly in front of where our home was. In fact, when you look back, you have a perfect view of our house. I circled the island. My guesstimation is the island was as long as 3 football fields or 300 yards, and maybe another 150 yards wide. So very sizable. And yes, this is sizable. In fact, I looked this up on Google Maps. There's a lot of islands right around Grosse Ile. Grosse Ile is a main big island, and there's a chain of islands surrounding this. But I've always known that, but I did look it up. And he goes on to say, the bad thing is that I could not find an area to dock my boat. Luckily, I towed a 2-man rubber raft-like boat with a small trolling motor on it that we used to motor ashore. Sally and I got out of the boat and proceeded onto the island. The island not developed. The island is not developed, and the trees and other foliage was abundant. There was some underdeveloped trails where wildlife appeared to travel through. But thinking ahead, I brought a machete to help plow our way and create a much better pathway. No less than 50 feet in, I stumbled upon the skull of a deer. Being a hunter, this without mistake was clearly a deer's skull. However, I did find it strange that there were deer on this island. How did they get here was my first concern. Well, not being a forestry or naturalist person of any sort, I figure that nature and wildlife can find a way. We had hiked the island for several hours when Sally and I began to hear those howls. Now, these are not muffled howls from the home. These are very distinct and clear. I made the mistake and did not bring a sidearm. To this, Sally is pissed off at me and is getting very scared. The howls got closer, and now we can hear full footfall surrounding us from all angles. Some sounded to be four-legged, and others seemed to sound bipedal. I do know the difference in patterns from both humans and animals, and this was a mixture of both. Then our fears heightened as the howl stopped and the footfall fell silent. You could hear a pin drop if allowed. Sally and I panned the woods from all directions. Then, after about 5 minutes, which seemed like an eternity, glowing red eyes emerged from the shadows of the woods. At first, all I can see are the eyes, the red eyes. The eyes hovered about 4 feet above the ground. Sally, to her left, sees another set of glowing red eyes. There are now 2 of these creatures. Then, the one that I am looking at rose up at least another 4 feet and stepped forward. The one to Sally's left remained stable and lowered to the ground. The creature that stepped out from the line was on 2 legs. It was black. The eyes glowed red. It had pointed ears off of the side on his head. The head was big. The snout protruded out almost double the length of any wolf or dog that I had ever seen. But this was not a dog, or was it a wolf? Nothing stands or walks on 2 feet, and nothing is 8 feet tall. Because now you guys arose from 4-foot position, now it's standing. The one to Sally's left now disappears. But mine stood tall, muscular, and intimidating. Then a voice popped inside of my head and uttered these words almost telepathically. Leave now and never come back, ever. The voice sounded evil. A pit in my stomach overtook and I vomited. I grabbed Sally's hand and made it back to the boat. Late at night, I still hear the howls from the tunnel within my house and the island across the river. I asked my neighbor if they ever heard the howls, and my neighbor replied to me, "What howls? I only hear the chirping of birds and the rustling of the wind." Now that scares me more than anything. Thank you, Rob, for doing this. Wow. What was that? I guess it's something on that island over there. Dogman, perhaps? Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. I hope the story wasn't too long. What really is scary, though, is it seems like this couple, they seem to be the only two on the island that hear howls. I mean, the neighbor has never heard howls, so is this just something that was looking in on these people? Were these entities? Were they dogmen? Was it something from another dimension? I don't know. I hope you enjoyed that. Subscribe to Bigfoot Michigan Rob, and please share me out. I love each and every single one of you. You guys have a great day, have a great weekend, and happy Friday 13th. BMR's out.